I used to think rest was something you could schedule, like an oil change. 3 weeks, one lake, no news. That was the prescription I gave myself after the incident at work, when I spent 46 minutes speaking to a team that wasn't there. Exhaustion, they called it. Acute burnout, with a garnish of humiliation. My therapist wrote environmental reset on a lime green pad and slid it across the table like a permission slip. I booked the lake house the next day. The listing called it Hearthmere. 3 syllables of someone else's nostalgia. Peeled paint shutters, a deep porch with a swing that knew stories, a narrow dock pointing at the middle of the water like a finger insisting on perspective. The agency email said, no parties, no pets, no visitors. The boathouse is locked. Do not attempt to swim after dark. It also said there would be a caretaker for basic grounds needs, a phrase so polite it had to be warning me about something. I drove up in late October when the trees had committed to rust. The highway peeled into County Road, then into a single-lane ribbon that flirted with the lake, and then pretended it hadn't. My wife, Mara, had kissed my cheek in the driveway that morning with an accuracy that felt practiced. Rest, she said. Text me when you arrive. Don't read email. Remember to eat. She tucked a thermos of soup into the passenger seat like a small insurance policy and didn't say the other part. Remember to come back different. Hearthmere sat where the peninsula curled in on itself, as if the lake had decided to hold something and then forgotten what. The house was bigger than I expected and smaller once I stepped inside rooms that made you bend to be invited in. Pine floors that remembered every tenant's toe. A banister polished by the kind of patience families use to afford one another. On the kitchen table, a note, a key, a map of the lake that pretended to be hand-drawn. The note said, Mark, welcome. Heat's finicky, cokes don't demand. Do not trust the left rear burner. Fresh linens upstairs. The dock bell rings in wind from the east. Don't bother it when the water is high. I'm around if you need grace. P.S. If you find something that feels like it belongs to the house, leave it where it wants to be. Grace turned out to be a woman in her 50s with the posture of someone who carried trays professionally in another life. I met her at the woodpile after I failed to split a log into anything but excuses. She took them all from me like a baton and quartered a stubborn round with a calm that made me want to apologize to the tree. You're the month, she said, not unkindly. They don't tell me names until there's a reason. Mark, I said. Just Mark is fine. She did a quick scan the way caretakers do. Boots, ring, the way a man looks at a lake like a mirror or a wall. Just Mark, she repeated, and put the edge protector back on the mall, like she trusted me not to ruin anything with enthusiasm. The first night was the way first nights always are in borrowed houses, performative. I built a fire badly and congratulated myself aloud for not burning the place down. I cooked eggs at a time that made no sense because the light said it might be morning if you weren't fussy. I walked to the dock and let the damp reach my bones and told my body this was medicine even if it protested the dose. Somewhere across the water, a dog did a single bark. The bell at the end of the dock, one of those bronze things with an unambitious clapper, didn't move. The wind had other plans. I slept as if arrested and woke to a house sound I couldn't place paper asking to be read. The kitchen had a door I hadn't noticed the night before, a skinny one beside the pantry. It stuck at first and then remembered manners. Behind it, a narrow staircase dropped to a half-below-grade room that tried to be a study and a cellar at once. It smelled like old book cloth and lemon oil with an undernote of lake, which is to say it smelled like a decision not to sell a house after a divorce. On the desk, a thin diary with a cloth cover the color of bruised plums. No lock, no label. I would like to say I considered not opening it, that I respected the note from Grace and left the book where it wanted to be. The truth is, I was the sort of tired that believes fate counts as permission. The first page said, in a hand both careful and impatient, June the 3rd. The bell rang from the east at 2:17, and he said it meant weather. It meant we were awake at the same minute, and neither of us wanted to be the one to turn it into talking. He left his mug on the railing with the chip pointing north. Who does that? Who points a flaw like a compass and dares the lake to argue? I touched my own front tooth with my tongue, felt the chip from a bicycle crash at 12. The page felt warmer than paper should. I turned it. June 11. He is a list. Up the stairs like he wrote them. Socks in the bin like a show for an audience that claps quietly. He calls the left rear burner temperamental, which is an insult and a romance. He apologized to the kettle when it whistled while I was speaking. He looked at me like we are in a pact with the furniture. He calls me E. I let him. It makes me feel like a vowel instead of a person. If I put this in the drawer, he will find it. If I leave it out, he will pretend he read it with his better self. I closed the diary because it had become a conversation, and I had snuck into the wrong time slot. Grace knocked at decent hours. She brought a basket of items I should have packed if I had planned for humanity sponges that didn't feel like lies, a dish towel that had committed to being clean, salt. There's a storm Friday, she said. The east wind wakes the bell. It'll sound like a thing you meant to do. Don't go into the boathouse. Locked, all right, I said. Doors don't keep people out, she said, and gave me a look that made me feel like a boy with a slingshot and more time than sense. I told myself the diary was a hazard like the burner. Identify, avoid. That worked until the second night when the house hummed the particular note old wood makes when it wants you to remember its talent for bearing weight. I went back down, half mad with curiosity and sleep. The diary lay exactly where I'd left it, as if I'd been tested and had not failed completely. Shaman 20 Warren. He says he does not sleep well anywhere but here. He says the city puts noise behind his eyes. He says the lake is a dial, and if he wakes at the right minute, he can turn himself down. He says a lot of things to the air and fewer to me. I tried putting a note on the fridge because he likes them. Inside joke, he loves a list. He wrote back on the same paper. The way men make their kindness efficient. I want the long version, and he keeps giving me receipt tape. I went to the boathouse anyway. I put my lips to the padlock and I could taste the old, the kind that belongs to every version of us that never happened. I had, in fact, told Mara the city put noise behind my eyes. I had, in fact, been gently mocked for writing on the backs of other people's notes because it felt thrifty. I put my forehead to the cool cellar window. The lake looked back like a conspirator. I texted Mara a photograph of the porch swing with a caption so anodyne, it felt like treason. This place smells like cut rope. Might actually rest. She hearted it and sent a picture of the cat half asleep on a tax document. We both miss you in different ways, Marisha, she wrote, which is the kind of sentence that makes you glad and complicated at once. The storm came Friday the way storms do, as fulfilled threats. The bell rang east at 2:17 like the diary promised. The lake shouldered itself into the bank and then remembered mercy. The dock did a very slow dance. I did not go outside because I am a man who has recently been introduced to consequences. I made tea. I read. June 28. If I stand in the kitchen and turn the mug so the chip points east, it feels like I am choosing something. He says choice is a sump pump for regret. He says big things in little rooms, and then puts his hand on my hip like punctuation. I heard the caretaker on the porch wood has ears in this house, and she left a jar with screws in it like an apology for not apologizing for knowing everything. I asked her if the lake keeps secrets. She said the lake keeps inventories. She said, don't make it write yours for you. Grace, inventory. A sentence I would have remembered if I had been listening when people taught me how to live. I went upstairs with the diary under my arm because I am not smart when left alone with an idea. On the landing, a mirror I had managed not to notice produced a man I had been trying not to be. Unshaven, curious in the amateur sense, mouth ready with a joke because serious is still expensive for me. The next entry that mattered was dated like an apology. July 3rd. He left yesterday. The map on the fridge says work with a line that goes nowhere. The bell rang at 2:17 as if that were the point. I didn't go to the dock. I stood in the boathouse's shadow and touched the lock and thought, if I were the kind of person who learned lessons early, I would learn now. The caretaker brought me bread and didn't say you'll be fine because she's a person who has met grief. She said, do not go in the water. She said it like she says, don't set your hair on fire. Why would I? Why would anyone? I went to the boathouse in daylight like a man testing himself in the shallow end. It was locked with a cheap padlock that had become honorary iron through sheer stubbornness. I pressed my finger to the hasp. It had that slick tack old brine leaves. On the far side of the boathouse, the water made a slapping sound against pilings, lazy but unsentimental. I noticed the ladder that went down off the dock was missing its third rung and thought, that's the kind of thing a person writes into a diary if they want it to stand for something. I asked Grace about the boathouse in the way people ask a question they expect to be refused. She was cutting back the hydrangeas with the sharp deliberations I envied. Owner keeps it closed when they're not here, she said. Insurance. Also grief. Both cost too much to argue with. The owner is the diarist, I said, then hated myself for using a word that made a person into a genre. Grace wiped her hands on her jeans. The owner is a woman who learned what the lake is for, she said. Sometimes it's for listening. Sometimes it's for saying no. That night, this is the part you will choose to believe or not. The lamp in the upstairs hall clicked off and then back on in that way old lamps do when they are not haunted but old wires have opinions. In that tiny dark, I could have sworn I heard the pages of the diary move. Not dramatically, like a person turning over in bed. I started reading it like a task. Not to consume, but to finish. That made it worse. The entries stopped being charming and started being forensic. Galila Britannonism. He promised. Men promise like they are an institution issuing visas. I wanted proof of residence. The bell is now an insult. Every time it rings from the east, I say nothing out loud and the house writes it down anyway. I found his razor behind the faucet. The handle is cracked where he dropped it on the tile once when we were laughing. I held it and thought, this is the door I keep pretending is a window. July 12th. Storm. My feet in the mud at the bank felt exactly like the past. He does this thing where he taps the rim of his mug before he drinks, like he's asking permission. I wanted to break the handle and make the lake swallow the chip and all our earnestness with it. July 17th. Grace said inventories again. She said, don't drown your choices and then pretend you were pushed. She didn't look at me when she said it because she is kind. I made a list to protect myself from lists. It said, I do not know this woman. I did not stay here. The mug chip thing is common. So is the joke about burners. People with lakes invent bells into metaphors. You are tired and the house is built for people who make meaning for sport. Beneath it I wrote, you left the city because you had a conversation with a room that wasn't full of people. Get some humility. On the fifth day, I woke to a door half open that I had closed, something small enough to be coincidence and large enough to move a weak man toward ritual. I went to town. The town had exactly what towns have on Wednesdays. Teenagers pretending not to be together. A store that sells everything and therefore nothing you actually want. A coffee shop run by a person too beautiful for coffee with a tip jar that said college in a handwriting that looked like a dare. I bought a notebook because that's what I do when I feel adrift. I buy thin paper and write thick thoughts on it. When I came back, Grace was on the porch with a coil of extension cord. The power will sulk, she said. Storm again. The east wind is bored. You hear it in the bell. Does the bell always ring at 2:17? I asked, because I wanted to be caught. Depends on the wind, she said. Depends on who's listening. You read it, I said. She set the coil down so neatly it made me ashamed of every drawer I've ever closed on purpose, with things inside arguing. People who rent houses like this pretend they're finding letters. It feels better than admitting the house found them. The diary belongs to the place. It will tell who it wants. You didn't steal anything. It knows where you put it. What happened to her husband? I asked. The way she writes about he left. The way she writes about storms. Did he drown? I heard the edge in my voice and wanted to bite it off. Grace looked at the lake. Her eyes did the calculating that people's eyes do when they are choosing between discretion and usefulness. People come to lakes to practice leaving, she said. Sometimes they get good at it. I stopped reading for a day. That felt like a victory. I stacked the diary under two unrelated books like that gesture could discourage a 19th century ghost. I wrote in my new notebook about the ordinary, the way the bathroom window stuck unless you pulled left a little first, the smell of wood smoke that didn't belong to me, The quiet glee of killing a wasp in the laundry room and feeling like I'd restored a small portion of civilization. I texted Mara. Soup was perfect. Made fire without drama. You'd like Grace. She edits me with her eyes. She replied hours later. Change is possible. Eat bread with your soup. Hydration, but delicious. That night the bell rang, and I did the thing I had decided not to do. I went out. The dock was slick with a day's resentment. The east wind took my ears in its teeth and worried them. The boathouse loomed like a thought you avoid during dinner. The padlock had a new scar of bright metal, like a story someone tried to tell it. The lake was very black and very calm, and I thought if I lean, it will take me as a suggestion, not a meal. Back inside, I went down to the diary, as if reporting back to a partner in crime. July 27. He said he was coming back. The map said 3 days. On day 4, the bell rang, and I went to the dock like a person being called. Not like a person deciding. The ladder is missing a rung, and I put my foot where it wasn't, and I didn't fall, and I wanted to, not because I want to be dramatic, but because the water forgives quicker than men. Grace says the water forgives nothing. It keeps ledgers like a landlord. She says if he doesn't come back, I should sell the house. I told her I would burn it first. The entry ended there, mid-anger. The next page was blank. The next page was blank. The next page had coffee in the corner and a single word, August. No day, no news, no body. I slept badly, which is to say I did the thing where you dream a number of short dreams about the same subject and wake between them to try to edit the plot and go back in and argue with your own brain about how the scene should go. In one version, I was the husband, and I left because I am, in fact, someone who leaves elegantly. In another, I was the caretaker, and I had chosen the lake over the couple, as if water were a child that needed to be raised. In a third, I was the diary, and someone else was turning my pages with skin too warm. On day 7, I found a second diary, not by cleverness, by vacuuming like an adult. The skinny staircase had a landing with a bad idea for a bookshelf, a ledge pretending to be furniture. The vacuum bumped it, and a board gave a little, and behind it lay a twin to the first book. Same bruised cover, same impatient hand. This one opened with a list that was not a list. September 1. I put the razor in the drawer. I wrote his name on a sticky note and put it on the calendar, not to remember, but to remind myself there are days he is not inside. Grace left bread again. The bread is not a metaphor. It is food. That felt important to say. A man came to see about the gutters and looked at me like people look when they think they know your story and are trying to guess whether you want them to say it out loud. He asked if I was managing. I said I am succeeding at some hours and failing at others. He nodded like that was something he could invoice. September 9. If I walk along the ridge, there's a place where the trees part like a curtain, and you can see the boathouse roof, and if you stand very still, you can trick your body into believing you are a witness and not a participant. I stood in that place for longer than I want to admit. A heron stood near the reeds like a line drawn by a careful hand. I thought, if I stand still enough, the lake will show me what it swallowed. It showed me sky. September 12th. It is a ridiculous truth that loving someone becomes a skill you can forget. I am trying to practice alone. I set his mug at the table and put the chip east and say things to the chair, and then erase them because they were written for a person who isn't here, and I refuse to audition for absence. The second diary included details the first hadn't. Not big things. Small ones I have always used to measure my life. A habit of checking the front door twice, not because of fear, but because of choreography. A dislike of wet socks so intense it borders on ideology. A way of testing pears for ripeness. Thumb at the neck. Pressure. A small prayer to a God who specializes in blush. I told myself anyone could be particular in those ways. I told myself I am not special enough to be recognized by a stranger. I told myself many things, and the only one that mattered was that I kept reading. Grace knocked when the soup ran out. You're reading it the way people read manuals when their car has already made the sound, she said. He left, I said. Or died. You know which. I know a lot of things, she said, not helpfully. Which one do you need me to say? The truth, I said, and heard how childish that sounded. She leaned against the door jamb like a person who has worked enough kitchens to know how to rest without leaving. Truth is the inventory, she said. The list of what is, not what you wanted. Was he faithful? I don't know. Did he drown? I don't know. Did he choose the leaving, or did it choose him? I don't know. Would it help to know? Not for long. I'm not asking as a tourist, I said before I could help it. It's starting to feel like your story, she said and nodded. Hearthmere does that. It turns the volume up on whatever you brought and then tells you it's playing house music. The owner asked me to let it because otherwise no one changes. People hate changing in public. Houses are good at making privacy feel like morality. Who is she? I asked. The owner. Not my story to tell, she said. And then, because she is not cruel, her initial is E. She asked me to tell you not to trust the left rear burner and to keep the bell from ringing when the east wind is only pretending. She asked me to tell you nothing else. Why me? You booked it, she said, as if that were theology. On the 10th day, the police report arrived. Not in the mail, on the desk. My name on the envelope, as if I had put it there in a different year. Inside, photocopies with grainy letterhead and the official boredom of forms. Missing person report filed July 23rd, adult male, 5'11", chip in front, right maxillary incisor, scar on left wrist. Last seen, dock at approximately 2:10 a.m., east wind rising. Statement by spouse, he said he needed air. Statement by caretaker, he said he needed truth. Notes, boathouse secured, no signs of struggle. Water level high storm. Recommendation, search when weather allows. Outcome, suspended. I sat down hard enough to make a chair consider its loyalties. I did the thing rational people do. I checked the copier in the den, none. The printer, dead, no paper. The nearest place one could have made duplicates, town hall, closed Sundays. I took the report to Grace like a boy with a frog. She looked at the paper, then at me and said, "The house is thorough." Is this some kind of therapy? I asked and hated every word as it left me. You rented a place the owner built to stop a particular kind of lying, Grace said. Coincidence is one of those lies. Destiny is another. My wife booked it, I said. Although she hadn't, I had. She'd never set me up. I didn't say wife, Grace said. You did. That night, Mara called for the first time since I arrived. I had texted like a person making a case for how well he was doing, and she had hearted like a person wanting to believe him. The ring startled me. How is it? She asked, and her voice sounded like home with a car running in the driveway. Quiet, I said. Grace texted me, she said. Said a storm took the power, but you didn't panic, and you asked about the generator like a person who respects fire. Grace texted you? She has my number from the agency, Mara said. I asked her to check on you if you didn't respond, because you do that thing where you're fine, and then you forget that fine is a performance, and the audience gets bored. She told you about the diary? I asked. Silence. Then carefully, I asked her not to. She said the house would. Did you know about it? I knew about a notebook, she said. The owner told the agency she writes. She didn't say what. You knew about the missing person report. No, she said, and hurt moved into her voice like fog. Mark, what is happening? I almost told her. I almost said, I think the house is describing me to myself and using someone else's handwriting because mine would disobey. Instead, I said, there's a bell, because that felt smaller, and I am good at saying the small truth when the big one is expensive. We were quiet together for a minute, the kind of connected silence that keeps a marriage above water when the air thins. Rest, she said again. Come back different. I read the diaries to the end like a person chasing a train he cannot catch. The last entry in the second book. October 2nd. The trees finally understood. I put the mug in the cupboard with the chip pointing wherever it wants. Grace says sell. She says stop renting the house to men who think they are strangers to their own stories. I say if it catches one that refuses to drown, it will be worth the noise. I am moving to the city. I will keep the key to the boathouse. Not out of romance, Inventory. The next day I found a third notebook, smaller, more utilitarian, spiral-bound. A grocery list cousin. This one wasn't a diary. It was a ledger of tenants, month, year, first names or initials, notes. April Cole and J. Nice. Mayus left early, cried. June M. alone, wrote. September L and P polite, clumsy with fire. The notes were bland until they weren't. November M. A question mark fat as an accusation. Beside it, a single line. Recognizes the bell. No year. I stared at the M until it stopped being a letter and started being a person with my shoulders. I thought of how quickly Grace had accepted just Mark. I thought of the way she never quite said my name unless I insisted on it. I thought of Mara, who calls me by my full name only when she is trying to keep both of us from performing. I wrote Mark in my notebook half a dozen times, and it looked wrong in a new way. Like a borrowed jacket you discover you have been wearing for years, and you suddenly realize your elbows have made it a home. On the 12th night, the east wind rose mean. The bell rang every minute for an hour, and then stopped as if the lake had turned a page. I put on my boots and my grandfather's coat, a superstition I bought when he died, and left me nothing but a photograph of himself laughing, and I went to the dock. The missing rung made itself known under my boot, and I corrected like a man who had fallen here before. The boathouse padlock hung open against the door, tongue out, as if someone had argued and left in a hurry. It took very little push to make the door admit me. Boathouses are lies we tell ourselves about safety. This one was tidy, which is to say it had been arranged to look uninviting. A rowboat upside down like a sleeping animal. Oars hung with military gravity. Hooks that remembered nets. A workbench with a shallow drawer. And on the bench, a mug. White ceramic, thick, with a chip on the rim. East side. I put my thumb on it and felt the old smooth of a wound that had learned to be a feature. I held it up to the light, and my throat did the thing throats do when a person finally stops pretending he is a witness. The shallow drawer stuck and then complied. Inside, a Ziploc bag with a folded sheet of paper, the missing person report. The original, not a copy, and a Polaroid. A man on the dock squinting into sun, middle distance, mouth making a joke only the photographer understood. 5'11", scar on left wrist, chip on front tooth visible only if you know to look. I looked. The longer drawer held nothing but a hardware store receipt from a county I have never admitted I visited, and a small brass tag stamped with a number. Quanavidurim. I was not afraid. I was very, very tired. I took the mug inside not because I had a plan, but because the night had started to treat me like a man who needed props. Grace came in without knocking the way people do when worried they will catch you doing something you won't forgive them for seeing. She looked at the mug. She looked at my face. She sat down like a person who had been waiting for a bus that took a kind route after all. "What's my name?" I asked, stupid and deadly calm. "Now?" she asked. "Yes, now." "Mark," she said. "It's a good name. And before. Before you were a month," she said. "And once a long time ago, you were M, with a question mark, and I was fairly sure you were going to drown on purpose, and then change your mind and blame the lake." "Did I?" I asked. "You changed your mind," she said. "I don't let the lake take the ambivalent. Did I come back?" "You returned a number of times," she said. "You have been returning ever since." "I don't remember," what I said, and the sentence sounded like mercy until it didn't. "The mind is a careful editor," she said. "It will redact what will kill you for a while. Sometimes it redacts what will save you, too." "Who is E?" I asked. Did she write this about me, or did I find a way to hear my life without admitting it? Grace folded her hands like a person in church who knows the hymns by heart, but refuses to sing out of respect for the new. "E is the owner," she said. "She rented to you once with a deposit, and once with a letter, and once with a promise, and once because she didn't know how else to have you near without having you." "Is she my wife?" I asked, and hated how badly I wanted a clue that made anything noble. "She is not Mara," Grace said. "Mara is real and she is kind, and you would do well to stop outsourcing your life to the lake and to the women who tend it. Did I leave E? I asked, or did she leave me? You both left in the ways you know how, she said, which is the sort of answer that refuses the neatness my tiredness craved. E built herself a house where men hear their stories out loud and have to decide whether to be embarrassed enough to change. She built a trap, I said. She built a mirror that forgives nothing and reflects only what you bring, she said. Traps require bait, mirrors require courage. The brass tag in my pocket had warmed to my hand. I put it on the table. 2:17, I said. The bell. The time. Inventory, she said. What do? I asked, and meant it more than I have meant anything said to anyone who wasn't Mara. Call your wife, she said. Tell her what color the night is where you are and why you have been sending your voice to other rooms. Then ask her what you owe. Then pay. Return the mug to the boathouse. Leave the diaries where the house wants them. Take your notebooks. Do not romanticize the lack of memory. It is a symptom, not a foundation. If you must swim, do it at noon with witnesses. I called Mara on speaker because I finally wanted the house to hear me try to be a person in the proper place. I told her about the diary without prettying it. I told her I thought I had been here before, in a version of my life I edited to make our marriage easier to carry. I told her there was a woman who wrote about a man with my habits and my bad jokes and my failures, and that I had read it as if it were literature when it was inventory. She did not say, you bastard. She did not say, come home. She did not say, E. She said, what color is the night there? And I loved her more than my capacity for drama. It's black, I said, but the kind you can see through if you stand still enough. It's bronze where the bell is. It's green where the lake keeps the northern lights even when the sky forgets. Come back different, she said. And then, because she is not an idea but a woman, come back honest. I took the mug back to the boathouse and set it on the bench with the chip facing nowhere important. I put the brass tag on the nail where the oars hang. I closed the shallow drawer. The padlock slid home easier than I wanted it to. The bell didn't ring, though the east wind had thoughts. I slept until morning, did a reasonable impression of a new beginning. On my last day I wrote E, a letter I will not quote here because not everything is content. I left it under the diary no name. No apology that was actually a petition to be forgiven, no romance to excuse us. Just a thank you to a stranger who built a sober machine. I told Grace I would send her bread from the city as a bribe to be ruthless with the next version of me who arrived wearing a new name. She said, no need, which is how she rescues people by refusing to be paid for it. I drove out under a sky that had remembered it knows how to be blue. At the last curve where the lake tries to follow the road and then gives up, my phone rang. No number. I picked up and said my name and then didn't, because which one? A woman's voice said, are you back? And her voice was orange peels and winter, and the way careful women sound on porches when they are deciding whether the person standing there has learned anything. Mara, I said to anchor myself, and the voice laughed a little, in a way that told me I had just chosen something, and that the choosing was the point. I'm at the grocery, she said. Do we need bread? Yes, I said, and milk. And can I tell you something about the color of our kitchen at night? You can tell me anything, she said, if you do it in the kitchen. At the first long straightaway, a heron lifted from the ditch with the unhurried competence of a thing that has survived without metaphors. The lake in my rear view was a rectangle of resignation. The house, if it was the sort that kept score, had a new mark. One man who didn't drown. Whether it had just returned me to a life I was lucky to have, or whether it had tried to remind me of a different life I had once auditioned for, I cannot tell you. I can tell you that the bell rang from the east at 2:17 every night I was there, and that sometimes I heard it and sometimes I didn't, and that difference was not the win. I don't think rest is something you schedule anymore. I think it's an inventory you take with the lights on. What you brought, what the house handed back to you, what you owe. The diaries are still in the cellar. They belong to the place. If you go and if the house chooses you, it will tell you a story and test whether you recognize yourself in it. If you do, you are lucky. If you don't, you are also lucky. You get to go home and learn to say the long version out loud to the only person who has to hear it. And if a bell rings from the east while you're speaking, let it. The lake can keep time. You keep the rest. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. It means a lot. New stories like this one are posted every single day, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one. And if this story touched you, please give it a like. It really helps more people find our content.